Good Shabbos. This week, as we continue in our annual reading of the Torah, our annual Torah reading cycle, we are reading, among other things, from Parshat Kedoshim. Kedoshim means holy, holy. This is roughly the middle section of the middle book of the Torah, appropriately. So roughly the middle section of the middle book of the Torah. It is a keynote of the Torah, and it is all about structuring holy community, building holy community, then and now. I'd like to read both the beginning and the end of chapter 19 of Leviticus, which is actually considered by modern scholars as part of the Holiness Code. It begins as follows: V'deber Adonai el Moshe lemor. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Daber al kol adat b'nei Yisrael v'amarta alehem kadoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Speak to the whole Israelite community and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. You shall each revere his mother and his father, and keep my Sabbaths. I, Adonai, am your God. Do not turn to idols or make molten gods for yourselves. I, Adonai, am your God. When you sacrifice an offering of well-being to the Lord, sacrifice it so that it may be accepted on your behalf. It shall be eaten on the day you sacrifice it, or on the day following. But what is left by the third day must be consumed in fire. If it should be eaten on the third day, it is an offensive thing. It will not be acceptable. One who eats of it shall bear his guilt, for he has profaned what is sacred to the Lord. That person shall be cut off from his kin. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap all the way to the edges of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall not pick your vineyard bare, or gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I, Adonai, am your God. You shall not steal. You shall not deal deceitfully or falsely with one another. You shall not swear falsely by my name, profaning the name of your God. I, Adonai. You shall not defraud your fellow. You shall not commit robbery. The wages of a laborer shall not remain with you until morning. You shall not insult the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. You shall fear your God, I, Adonai. You shall not render an unfair decision. Do not favor the poor or show deference to the rich. Judge your kinsmen fairly. Do not deal basely with your countrymen. Do not profit by the blood of your fellow. I, Adonai. You shall not hate your kinsfolk in your heart. Reprove your kinsman, but incur no guilt because of him. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against your countrymen. Love your fellow as yourself. I, Adonai. And the chapter continues, but it concludes, you shall rise before the aged and show deference to the old. You shall revere your God. I, Adonai. When a stranger resides with you in your land, you shall not wrong him. The stranger who resides with you shall be to you as one of your citizens, and you shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I, Adonai, your God. You shall not falsify measures of length, weight, or capacity. You shall have an honest balance, honest weights, an honest ephah, and an honest hin. I, Adonai, am your God, who freed you from the land of Egypt. You shall faithfully observe all my laws and all my rules. I, Adonai. And in between the opening and closing of that chapter, there are many other laws and rules and regulations. Some of them are quite straightforward and easy for us to understand on the surface. For example, one of those I did read, you shall rise before the aged and honor the face of the elder. You shall revere your God, I, Adonai. This command, telling us to give honor and glory to our elders, just as we are to give honor and glory to God, is easy enough to translate into our time and place, even though as a society we do not do a good job at this at all. This verse, though, actually is written on the wall of the lobby of the former Jewish home. We can see the direct relevance of this teaching to our society. By contrast, we also find in this section of Torah the teaching that you shall not let your cattle mate with a different kind. You shall not sow your field with two kinds of seed. You shall not put on cloth from a mixture of two kinds of material. These laws may seem to carry less relevance for us in our day. But as always, there is more for us to dig down into. When we look at the creation stories of the Torah and in fragments of creation accounts embedded in the book of Psalms, we see that a significant aspect of our ancient creation accounts involve making order from chaos. Order from chaos. The Torah opens with the words, Breshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, v'haaretz hayata tohu vavohu. When God began creating the heavens and the earth was tohu vavohu, unformed and void, and darkness was on the face of the depths, and the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the waters. What this implies is that at the beginning of creation, there was more than simply nothing. The creation story in the Torah is not simply a story of something coming out of nothing. There is something before creation in this story. Unformed and void, hovering over the face of the waters. There is something before creation, but it is chaotic. There is no order. The process that is described in the 6 days of active creation preceding Shabbat is not a process of creating something out of nothing, but rather a process of creating order out of chaos. God separates light from darkness, separates the waters of the sky from the waters below the sky, separates the dry land from the water. God is imposing order by separating things out from each other. In that context, these commands in Leviticus not to mix categories can also be read as a command not to undo the process of creation and return creation back to a state of chaos. There are categories of order that maintain all of creation. Do not undo them and destroy the universe as we know it, or at least destroy the earth. So these commands against mixing different elements of the natural world might possibly be read as a command not to undermine the natural world through our humanly engaged agricultural and industrial activity. In applying the Torah this way, I return to some basic principles about reading the Torah as Jews. First of all, in the words of my teacher and renowned scholar, Rabbi Arthur Green, we do not put the Torah behind glass. The Torah is not a museum piece. It is speaking about us here and now. We're not looking at it through some piece of glass. In the words of the Haggadah, we are the people leaving Egypt today. We are to read the story of the Exodus as if we ourselves were liberated from Egypt. In fact, are being liberated from Egypt now. As I often say, We are the people who walk through every panel of the Torah scroll. When we read the Torah, we are not reading about them, we are reading about us. And although we are reading about us long ago, in the words of yet another scholar, Reverend Richard Nelson, who used to be the professor of Hebrew Bible at the Lutheran Theological Seminary in Gettysburg, when he contrasted the Jewish relationship to the Hebrew Bible with the Christian relationship to the Hebrew Bible, he said, there is a cultural continuity between the Hebrew Bible and the Jewish people, even until today. That does not exist in the relationship between the Hebrew Bible and other peoples. As Jews, we have a direct connection to this text that no one else has, because the text itself grows out of our culture and our tradition, and we have remained connected from each generation to generation, both to our texts and to our community. And in Reverend Richard Nelson's opinion, on a practical level, that continuity had a lot to do with our people's connection to the Hebrew language, which has kept us solidly anchored in the text of the Hebrew Bible. So when we are reading the Torah, we are to read it not as addressing a time long ago in a place far away. We are to read it as addressing us in the here and now. The major and most essential process of translation involves translating the lessons not from Hebrew to English, but translating the lessons from the social and economic institutions of the ancient Near East into the social and economic institutions of today. In other words, the book of Leviticus itself is written in terms of the society of an earlier day, which is pre-industrial, rural, agricultural, with rigid gender roles, polygamy, slavery as a form of debt repayal, animal sacrifices and agricultural tithes as a major form of worship, extensive reliance on oral history as a means of record keeping, and an informal system of criminal justice. But against that background, the primary question of the book of Leviticus is, how do we create holy community? And even though our society is structured very differently, the issue, how do we create holy community, is still a question for us, which we need to ask against the fabric of our social and economic institutions. Leviticus 19 opens up with the command, Kedoshim tiyu, ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. You, in the plural form, you all, y'all, yous, yuns, yuns, you shall be holy, for I, Adonai, your God, am holy. You as a community shall be holy in imitation of the divine. You as a community shall imitate God in the way you live life individually and communally. And the chapter ends with, I am Adonai, your God, who freed you from the land of Egypt. You shall faithfully observe all my laws and all my rules, I, Adonai. In other words, the God you are imitating is a God of freedom, liberation, and justice. What does that look like against our social and economic reality? Not placed under glass and examined as a museum piece? That is the question this text presents to us. And it is always by returning to the question that the text poses to us that we can then most directly enter into its teaching. What does this look like for us today? Because Leviticus 19 addresses many aspects of life, many issues that are relevant to all of human existence for all of our generations, and in particular ways that are relevant to Jewish existence throughout all our generations. This section of Torah is telling us that our actions as individuals and our structures and policies as a community need to be informed with justice, compassion, righteousness, and faithful memory to who and what we are, in ways that touch every aspect of life. The ways we worship, and the shared holidays we keep, the ways we speak to each other and the ways we treat each other, the ways we use money and interact with each other, whether we are poor or rich, in the ways we seek justice, in the ways we treat the elderly, the ways we treat the stranger, the orphan, the least advantaged in society, in the ways we create family, in our sexuality, in our grooming, in our dress, in what we eat, in the ways we do business, in the ways we engage in agriculture and interact with the natural world around us. This chapter addresses every single aspect of all of those aspects of life. We are to utilize all those aspects of life as individuals and as a community to give expression to the sort of world we aspire to be living in, essentially imitating the God we profess to be committed to. In every aspect of life, we are to act in a way that shows recognition that each human being is an expression of the God, an expression of the image of God that we imitate. V'ahavta l'ra'acha kamocha ani Adonai. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And not only your neighbor, but the stranger too. You shall love the stranger as yourself. Where it says you shall love your neighbor as yourself, it ends with I Adonai. So what's the connection there? We're to love the stranger as ourself, both of which are in the image of God. You shall love the neighbor as yourself and the stranger. You shall love the stranger as yourself, for you shall remember that you too were strangers in the land of Egypt. Rabbi Michael Strassfeld, in his recent book that I would recommend to all of you, titled Judaism Disrupted, a Spiritual Manifesto for the 21st Century. Some of you, if you're as old as me, may remember the Jewish Catalog. The Jewish Catalog, a do-it-yourself kit, compiled and edited by Richard Siegel, Sharon Strassfeld, and Michael Strassfeld, who later went to the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, and now actually has written this book, which he said was a lot harder to write. Judaism Disrupted, a Spiritual Manifesto for the 21st Century. It's something definitely worth us reading together and talking about. He writes there that in his view, all of Torah may be seen as a response to the issue of freedom. That all the commandments can be seen as spiritual practice for living freely, as instruction for how to free ourselves from things that are in the way of living a life of freedom, from anxiety, from low self-esteem, from jealousy, from materialism, and all manner of other spiritual and social issues that enslave us. And so it is that all of the mitzvot of the Torah are a response to the freedom acquired in coming out of Egypt. I, Adonai, am your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I, Adonai. And so the entire Torah is about freedom in some sense. A key element to this, however, is that none of us can do this alone. We have to do this with community, within community. So the Torah prescribes for us that we create holy community. The Torah itself is structured so that the middle book of the Torah, Leviticus, is all about how to structure holy community. So often we lose sight of the forest for the trees here. It's about building holy community, and we've got all these other laws in there that people get overwhelmed about. But ultimately, put it all together, it's about creating sacred community. Kedoshim tiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. You, yuns shall be holy, for I, Adonai, your God, am holy. As we move forward together, let us contemplate together what we need to do on a micro level here, just starting in our community, on a micro level, to create stronger, closer, holy community together. Y'all. Shabbat Shalom.